Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 14 of A Letter to the King. For those of you new to the series, this is my attempt to capture the to and fro, the biff and the bash on Euro PvP 1. Before we get into where we were last week, a big welcome to all the new captains. I know there was a Steam sale on this week and there's been a whole bunch of folks in help asking how they do the first missions and all that sort of stuff. So carry on asking in help. It's a good community and people will respond to you. There's also plenty of links. There's a great Naval Action wiki maintained by one of the moderators. He has links to a whole bunch of vids on there. And if you found this channel of mine, if you look in the Naval Action playlist, there's a whole bunch of vids on how to manual sail and first mission walkthroughs, gunnery practice and so on and so forth. We're only a couple of days away now from the new content patch, which should bring with it some tactical improvements around double shot and double charge. So that'll be interesting for sea battles. There's also the officers are coming, so that too should be interesting. That'll give us different ways of tuning up our ships. I'm rather hoping that the existing ships obviously get some officer slots, and I'm hoping that it's another one of these things where you get, I don't know, 3 to 5 slots based on the build of the ship, and hopefully there'll be more officers than there are slots, so we can have lots of variety with our ships. And of course we've also got crew coming, so we'll be having to staff our ships and look after them with the crew, as well as some of the fleet changes where we can capture ships again and sail them home if they're not ships of the line. So hopefully this week will be a good week for Naval Action. Lots of new captains, lots of new content, and we can carry on testing. Right, let's get to the nub of it and see what's been happening. So last week, if you recall, the Americans had captured the north part of the Bahamas. The Brits had pushed quite nicely into the tip of Haiti. There was, although it was beginning to sort of quieten down, there was rumours that there was going to be a treaty breaking out here, but the Swedes were in the squeeze, and the Dutch had lost a lot of ports along the mainland here, including Pampatan or some such thing like that, which apparently is a very significant and strategic port, and that was very saddening for the Dutch. The Spanish had grabbed the Cays, and the Spanish had also moved in around the sort of Honduras-Panama area, and were beginning to help the pirates stem the British recovery of the lands lost to the treason and treachery that will never be mentioned again. Right then, let's have a little scooch at what happened this week. So the Americans carried on with their push, a much revived nation. After being spanked all the way back to Charleston, the Americans carried on their push in the Bahamas, and they've really cut in now, moving into the centre and capping a couple of towns that threatens the PvE trading of your regular pirate puppies, should such a thing exist. And I think in one day there, the Americans snaffled up 5 ports. So they're really pushing in on this island chain. They decided not to tease the Spanish too much, which is why I think the Americans would have been a bit disappointed when the Spanish, who are very strong allies / lovers / bromance with the pirates, actually started pushing into the tip of Florida. And so the Spanish came in and snaffled up a couple of ports. The Americans did respond, so the US did manage to grab KO something or other down here in the little archipelago off the tip of Florida in the Keys. So all of a sudden a second front potentially has opened up for the US, and that'll be difficult to maintain. They're causing merry hell for the pirates. The pirates are fighting on multiple fronts around St. Nick and Les Gon, and also down here, sort of Honduras, Panama, Yucatan space. So it'll be a great relief to the pirates that their Spanish buddies have started nibbling away at the Americans. So a good week for the Americans, more trouble in the Bahamas for the pirates, but the Spanish have entered the fray in Florida. So that'll be an interesting test now of the American resolve. There is talk that if the PVP2 merge occurs, we may see a big resurgence for the US, because there is a lot, obviously, it's the US time zone PVP2. So we may see a bit of resurgence for the US, and it could be good timing if it happens soon. We are beginning to see a few PVP2ers move over, although I know the PVP2 community are very proud of their Biffo, and are enjoying, although it might be small numbers, it's furious fighting over there on PVP2. Now, down here in the Antilles, last probably 3 weeks, there's been real toing and froing. The Dutch pushed the French all the way back up to Fort Royal at one point. The Swedes were down to a single port and managed to get themselves back up at one point to 20 ports. I think they were down to 8 at the start of the week. The Danes were really struggling to fight on two fronts. They were fighting the Brits in Haiti, and they were fighting over here with the Swedes, and not much relief. However, in more recent times, the Danes have they turned their eye away from the west and really focused on the east in the Antilles. And equally the French, with the Swedes more fully engaged with the Danes, the French were able to make good wind and really push the Dutch back and started taking some of the ports that the Dutch really begin to care about. And as a result, and it's unbelievably worded treaty occurred between the Dutch, the French, the Danes and the Swedes. Now, this treaty is super duper complex, more complex than any gaming patch will ever bring us. It involves basically, you'll have to find it on the forums. If you go into the national diplomacy section on the Games Labs forums and have a fertile around there, you'll see the treaty. And fundamentally, and I may have misread this because it's all sort of role played in legal la-di-da language, but as far as I can tell, the French have to cede a couple of ports back to the Dutch. The French take a port right in the middle of Swedish waters. It's almost like a hostage port. It's a bit like in the olden days where your son had to go and live in the court. It's kind of that. They've got a port up here. That's the sort of Theon Greyjoy port, and we all know that ended well for him, and different bits of him. The French have an area around their islands that is basically no one is allowed to PvP. There's areas around Haiti, around the south of Haiti, where the Dutch and Swedes are not allowed to interrupt with the national war against the British, so no screening is allowed there. The French, by all accounts, can PvP their merry hearts off in Dutch waters and indeed Swedish waters, which is a bit interesting. And it's very interesting. So this new arrangement, I'm all for it. The European Union Carebear arrangement is, I believe, its official term. And these colours are almost right, so that's excellent. Well done, everybody in the graphics department on bringing that one together. Not so sure about that, but that's probably a little bit off colours-wise. But we'll see how that holds. I know there's various levels of disgruntlement. And of course, the measure of a good treaty is everybody's a little pissed off about it. If everybody's a little pissed off about it, that's generally a good sign of a treaty. Because if one nation's sitting there going, oh, aye, this is right, brilliant, this is, and the other three are greeting, then that's not so good. But right now, I think this Carebear here, Monsieur Carebear, has done very well out of it indeed. I'm not quite sure what the Dutch and Swedes are meant to do. I think they're somehow meant to magically appear over here and help the Brits. They're a long way from helping the Brits, and they're not allowed to help them in Haiti. So great result for the Danes, great result for the French. And as a result of the Carebear European Treaty of Love, Cuddles, Dolphins and Kittens, what this has allowed is the French were given a port over here, Dominican Republic, bad geography, Jeheil, work that one out. Obviously, when you give the French a port, you have to find a port with the right name to give to the French. So in this case, they gave them the port of Ponce. which I believe is apparently quite fitting. The French rapidly headed over in a Ponce fashion, and once they had taken Ponce, they cast their eyes west, and pretty much on the last day of the weekend, they absolutely smacked the Brits, and they pushed the Brits all the way out of the south side of Haiti here, and they did it with a set of screening fleets composing obviously of their own ships involved in the action, but there was also the pirates and the Spanish came to help. Now, although the Brits did well and they sank a lot of big ships, a lot of first rates went down, a fourth rate fleet was totally smashed. With the player base somewhat limited as it is right now, if you're facing off against a primary force that's well geared up and motivated and screeners from other nations, well, your pants will be pulled down and a jolly good rogering you shall receive. And that's what happened to the Brits across the south side of Haiti. There is an upside from this, and I don't know if other nations are doing this. I'll actually stick a link in my description here. What's happened with the Brits now is they're getting so caned on every front. They're fighting to the north, they're fighting to the east, they're fighting to the south, they're fighting to the west, and they're up against 4 nations who are working together, coordinating together, screening together. You'll see the Brits will pull a flag in one corner of the compass, and immediately the allies of their targets pull flags on the other end of the planet. Or the Caribbean, and this is really difficult now for the Brits. So what's happened is the Brits, all the clans have collapsed their Teamspeak into a unified national Teamspeak. It allows them to pull in the pubbies and get the pubbies involved in organised defences and semi-organised attacks. And so this is an interesting outcome. So the Brits, who before the clans used to operate, although they segmented the map up and sort of shared out areas of operation, with player numbers being down quite so much in the last 4 to 6 weeks, this has caused a bit of cooperation. And it's sort of battlefield Britain at the moment, where we know the Brits know that they're under the cosh from 4 coordinated nations getting stuck into them, with the Danes, the Spanish, the pirates, and the French, and they're all on the Brit doorstep. So the Brits have created this national channel. So if you are a Brit and you're looking to get involved, I'll stick a link in the vid. Now, I am a one-eyed Brit, and God bless you, all who sail with you. But if any of the other nations have a similar thing, if they have a national chat communication tool that they want to share with their pubbies and all the new players who've come over from Steam, just personal message me on the forums, the Games Labs forums, Jeheil, or stick a reply to this post with a link, and I'll add that link and I'll comment on it in my next video. So, trouble at Milford Brits now. We've got the French in across the south of Haiti. We've got the Spanish holding the south of Cuba. Our pirate friends are always playing around Saint Nick and Port-de-Paix and Les Gons. So this has all gone pretty much fugazi over here for the Brits. And although they've got good relations with the Dutch and have helped the Swedes out a great deal when they were bashed down to a single port by giving them half a dozen ports over here, and they have worked somewhat with the Americans, all of their allies are a long way away or fully engaged. The Americans don't have spare resources. The Dutch are a real league away. How they're going to get in and help the Brits, they probably can't help the Brits against the Carebear Confederation, so they'd have to help the Brits up here, and that's, you know, to the other end of the map. And equally the Swedes, that's a whole bunch of bunny hopping to get anywhere near helping the Brits out. These guys are going to have no PvP now they have the Carebear Confederation of Love, Cuddles, Kittens and Dolphins. So let's see how that one pans out. Now, in the Honduras, Panama, Yucatan, Bifo, although very little has changed, I think since last week there's only been 2 ports is the net change. Utila, I can't remember its name, changed hands last night. I don't know why I can't remember its name. I was fighting there. Ruatan, there you go. A bit of regression therapy. Ruatan changed hands. We'll talk about that battle because it was epic, mostly because I was in it. And the Spanish retook one of the ports the Brits had up here. Now, the Spanish have been quite strategic in which ports they've taken. They've taken Great River and Brewers. And what that meant is the Brits either have to run from up around here, from Placer, or Satsuma, or Manzanilla, or whatever it's called. Or they have to run from Croata. Now, Croata's the worst port in the world because you basically have to sail 15 minutes into the wind, get out the shallows, and then sail 15 minutes with the wind, or the opposite. So it guarantees a 30-minute flag carry just to get opposite the Spanish ports, and then it's another 10 minutes to get into a pirate port. So these two ports are a pain in the bum. So there was a real big push. So this is the free port of Banaka. These are the free port of Bensalem. And these two are two of the busiest free ports on the map. There's basically Spanish, Brits and pirates piling in and out of these ports left, right and centre. And in order to take Ruatan, the Brits, we'd only assembled about 15 or so ships and decided to blow the whistle and sail on our merry way. Before we even pulled the flag, there was fighting going outside the port. I managed to brilliantly lose my ship in a capping exercise. If you misclick defend, terrible things happen. But then we pulled the flag and off we headed to take Ruatan. And here you go. This is how hardcore the screening is. As we left the free port of Banaka, we were met by a Spanish victory and a pirate victory and 4 or 5 other pirate ships. Those of us who managed to get out of that combat were then met by a Spanish third rate and a rattlesnake and something else, a frigate or something. Those who got out of that combat, and there wasn't much of us left by then, were then blocked by a Bellona and a rattlesnake. So a good mix of a hard ship and a tagging ship. And at first, of the dozen or so Brits who'd left, I was the only one who managed to make it into the port battle. However, when I got into the port battle, we'd taken the port the night before, and when I got into the port battle, there was only 3 pirates working it over, so it was this bizarre situation of 3 on 1 with the 5 towers kicking balls out left, right and centre. And after 30 minutes, one of my mates eventually managed to make it in. Didn't realise he'd made it in, thought he'd been tagged in open water, had the brilliant idea of surrendering so he could quickly jump into the port battle, only to discover he'd surrendered from the port battle. Well done. We'll never mention that person's name if he pays me a ransom. Now, a bit later, a few of the Brits managed to get into the port, and eventually we managed to hold it. So it was a really furious night, but the screening that was going on here and the screening that went on for the French advance, I think it's going to be a bit much for the Brits. And I think this 4 on 1 is going to change the map in the next couple of weeks. I really expect the Brits to be left holding parts of Jamaica and clinging on to a couple of these islands unless something big changes, unless this treaty falls to pieces, unless the Dutch and the Swedes come and help, unless the US can put pressure elsewhere on the Spanish, then I really fear for all things Brit. Where will the Biffo be next week? Well, that's a good call. Obviously, there's going to be fighting along these areas over here in sort of South America. This is going to be where the big thunder is, with the French moving in now and the Danes helping out. The Danes, to some extent, have been cut off from the action, so they're going to have to, I'm not sure, they're going to have to come round another way to get at the Brits, otherwise they're going to have no PvP. The French have kind of nicked it all. Will the Spanish get stuck more into the Americans? Or will they too push down on the Brits, both Jamaica proper and perhaps across the Bight here? And will the Brits be able to hold on to sort of the north side of the spit? I'm not sure. It's looking pretty hectic. So if you're not involved in PvP, get involved. One other thing I'd like to say as well, something I noticed, I mean, I know I do my bit with Letter to the King, but I'm not the only one who explains what's going on, and lots of people have battle reports. I'm going to stick a link there's a series of battle reports done by one of the pirate scumdogs, who writes rather well and does little pictures, so he tells it as a story. It's obviously told from the pirate perspective. So all of their mistakes are ruses and all of the British brilliance is luck, but it's beautifully written, and the outcome is reasonably true. But he who holds the pen writes history. But I'll give you a link. I quite like them. They're quite amusing, and they tell the story well. What's going to happen over here with the Carebear alliance of Love, Dolphin and Kittens, we don't know. I do know there's some grumpy monkeys about it, so perhaps that will be next week's episode. Perhaps we'll see some shenanigans over there in the Antilles. It's pretty hard to police a truce when there's sort of rogue clans running around. So keep your eyes open for flags popping in the Antilles. And finally, let's go and have a look at the tally of splinters, sail and blood. Well, to be honest, it's been a relatively quiet week as far as the net impact of ports changing. But there has been lots of ports taken and retaken, so I can really here only show the net. I can't show the number of ports that were taken and then recaptured. The pirates have lost a couple. That's with the US pushing in, has driven that down. They did gain a few ports off the Brits, but overall they still lost a couple because the Americans did so well. The Spanish pretty much held their own, so they did take a couple of ports off the Americans, but they lost a couple of ports to the Brits, Sandy Cay and the likes. The Brits down 6, and that's very much the last minute run by the French, knocking them out of Haiti. And of course it's the French who've had the most glorious week. Not only did they scrounge a win against Ireland in the European Championships, but they had a big win over the Brits in naval action, and of course they've got this treaty, which I think is for them the best arrangement possible, so their diplomats should get a big tap on the back for that. The Americans made a good run. They took more than 4 ports off the pirates, but they did lose a couple to the Spanish, who've entered the fray around the Florida Keys and Florida proper. The Dutch, well, other than negotiating this treaty, they didn't get involved in any significant biffo. The Danes, it looks like the Danes had a bad week, but really what's happened is they handed a couple of ports to the French. They also handed a couple of ports over as part of the treaty, and some of the ports the French took had previously been taken from them by the Brits. So the Danes, although it looks bad for them, it's probably a good week for them. They've turned off war on one flank. And lastly, the Swedes, well, they still have the numbers they had at the start of the week, but they have peace now, so perhaps they can turn their eyes elsewhere. And that really is about it for this week's episode of A Letter to the King. Once again, welcome to all the new guys who've jumped on board. Get involved, lads. Find a clan. You don't have to find a clan, but if you want to be involved in some of the bigger PvP and the organised PvP, it's the best way to do it. Ask around in your global chat. Like I say, the Brits have set up this national Teamspeak. Find out about that if you're a Brit. I'm sure there's equivalents. I'm sure there's either national ones with the other nations, or there's a primary clan who will let you jump on board so you can get involved in some of the attacks and the likes. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode 14. Patch is coming in the next couple of days, guys, so that should be good. So this is me signing off. I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.